Part 1, Cheap Never Comes Free. Rain had been falling for 18 straight days in Portland, the kind that didn't pour, just drizzled endlessly, turning everything into shades of grey and rust. By the time Ethan Caldwell reached the old Selwood district, his windshield wipers had worn a groove into the glass. The rental listing had called it a classic 3-story brick duplex with vintage charm. What it really was, a 1912 building sagging under the weight of a century of rain. He parked at the curb, hood up, staring through the fogged windshield. The brick facade looked mottled and tired, the porch light flickering in rhythm with the rain. A warped "For Rent" sign clung to the railing, letters bleeding blue ink down the wood. Malcolm Whitaker was already waiting in the doorway, tall but bent, face half hidden under a wool cap. His left leg dragged slightly as he stepped down. The first thing Ethan noticed wasn't the limp, it was the sound of it, like a hammer wrapped in cloth hitting concrete. "You early," Malcolm said, voice dry as splinters. "Good sign." "Yeah, traffic was lighter than I thought," Ethan replied, hoisting his duffel. Malcolm studied him with his one good eye, the other, a cloudy marble, seemed to look inward. He gave a faint grin that didn't reach his mouth. "Before we do papers," Malcolm said, "I gotta ask, anyone gonna notice if you go missing?" Ethan froze mid-step. "Sorry?" "Family, friends. Someone who'd raise hell if you vanished." Ethan chuckled awkwardly. "You mean like a background check?" Malcolm's smile held. "Something like that." Inside, the air smelled of varnish and old insulation. The floors creaked in patterns, like someone following 2 steps behind. Ethan set his bag down as Malcolm led him to the dining room, where a plastic folder waited on the table beside a rusted key ring. The rental contract looked standard until the end. An addendum in red ink? Tenant shall not, under any circumstances, tamper with or alter the interior walls. Access to basement prohibited after 10 p.m. hours. Ethan looked up. "That's oddly specific." Malcolm shrugged. "Old wiring, structural issues. Legal thing." "Right," Ethan said, signing anyway. $950 a month, cheaper than any apartment within 20 miles. Cheap never came free. As they finished, thunder rolled faintly over the Willamette. Malcolm's good eye twitched toward the ceiling. "You'll hear noises sometimes," he said. "Pipes. Rats. Don't go investigating. It's an old house, it remembers things better left alone." Ethan forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind." Malcolm's limp echoed away down the hall, leaving a faint smell of copper in his wake. The first night passed quietly, except for the rain tapping the windows like fingertips. Ethan unpacked his laptop, set up a temporary desk by the bay window, and fell asleep to the soft hum of a podcast. On the third night, he woke at 2:17 a.m. The rain had stopped for the first time in weeks, and the silence pressed in like insulation. Then he heard it, a whisper, low and close, not from outside, but from inside the wall behind his bed. At first, he thought it was air leaking through the vent. But then the whisper split into words. "Take it down there, today's the last day." Ethan sat up. "Hello?" The whisper stopped. Then, slowly, a thin red line seeped down the drywall seam, tracing the edge of the outlet panel, dark, sticky, unmistakable. Blood. He stumbled back, hitting the nightstand. The lamp flickered twice and died. The room reeked suddenly of iron and mildew. When the light returned, the stain was gone. Only the faintest discoloration remained, like it had sunk inside. He told himself he was overtired, stress, caffeine, the new jobless life creeping in. But even as he lay back down, he could feel something, a faint vibration in the wall, like breathing. By the next evening, Ethan had convinced himself it was all nerves. He buried himself in code tests on his laptop and noise-cancelling headphones. At 2:04 a.m., someone knocked on his door. Not a polite knock, a single, deliberate bang. He hesitated, grabbed the flashlight from his desk, and opened the door. Maeve Serrano stood in the hall, dripping wet, a bottle of whiskey dangling from one tattooed hand. Her purple-black hair clung to her cheekbones. Her arms were inked in black spirals and geometric runes that looked almost alive under the whole light. You new here, she said. Not a question. Yeah. Ethan. Maeve. Next door. She pushed past him without asking, leaving muddy boot prints across the wood. Sorry, it's 2 a.m. I know. She placed the whiskey on his counter, took 2 mismatched mugs from his cupboard like she'd done it before, and poured. Ethan watched her light a cigarette against his stove. Something wrong? Maeve exhaled smoke toward the ceiling fan. You hear them yet? Them who? The walls. He hesitated. I thought I was dreaming. She tapped her temple. You weren't. They whisper when it rains the hardest. Always after midnight. Ethan's stomach turned. I thought maybe it was pipes, or... Maeve laughed, sharp and tired. Yeah, sure. Pipes that breathe. Pipes that say your name. He stared at her, unsure if she was mocking him. She took a sip of whiskey. You got any holes yet? Holes? Maeve lifted her shirt sleeve, revealing a line of small circular marks drilled along her bedroom wall in a floral pattern, or so she'd thought, until she noticed what was behind them. See, someone filled mine with putty. But look close. She pulled a flashlight from her jacket and shone it at Ethan's wall. Tiny indentations dotted the plaster, 12 of them, in a neat arc barely visible unless you knew to look. They're peepholes, she said quietly. Every one points toward the bed or the shower. Ethan stepped closer. The holes weren't random, they'd been patterned into the wallpaper's vines, masked perfectly. Maeve's voice softened. I sealed most of mine, but they keep reopening. Like the wall heals around them. Rain started again outside, soft at first, then heavier, the sound filling the silence between them. Ethan finally spoke. Why would anyone? Maeve cut him off. Because someone's still inside. He stared at her, searching her face for any hint of irony. There was none. Just exhaustion and a kind of brittle acceptance. The last tenant, she said, lowering her voice, a musician, gone after 6 weeks. Before him, a couple. Before them, a student from PSU. All vanished. You're still here. Not for long. She downed the rest of her whiskey, eyes glinting under the flicker of the stove light. Ethan leaned against the counter, trying to process it. You think the landlord's involved? Maeve looked toward the wall. I think he listens too. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the rain, drumming heavier, faster, until the pipes groaned under the weight. Then, faintly, from behind the plaster, a sound like glass cracking. Maeve's head snapped toward it. You heard that? Ethan nodded. A soft click echoed, a mechanical one, deliberate. Then silence again. Maeve moved to the door. If you see the basement light on after 10, don't go down there. She paused, hand on the knob, and looked back. Next time you hear whispering, don't answer it. It remembers your voice. And then she was gone, leaving the faint smell of smoke and rain behind her. Ethan stood in the empty kitchen, heart pounding. He looked at the wall one last time. The holes were gone, smooth plaster again, as if they'd never been there. But when he turned off the lights and lay back down, he could feel it, not hear, not see, just feel the faintest hum inside the wall. Something moving. Something waiting. Outside, the rain picked up again, relentless. Somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked open. And for the first time since he'd arrived, Ethan wasn't sure if he was alone. Part 2, the whispers from the drywall. The rain didn't stop, it simply changed tempo. Some nights it hissed against the brick like a warning, other nights it drummed slow and heavy, like footsteps pacing the roof. By day 5, Ethan stopped checking the weather app. It always said the same thing, steady showers, indefinite. He tried to resume a normal life. Job listings. Resume tweaks. Coffee gone cold on the desk. But every few hours, the house reminded him it was awake, Timbers creaked in places where no weight pressed them, and the pipes whispered just out of pattern, syllables forming and collapsing before his mind could catch them. At 3 in the morning, the lights dimmed and flared twice, perfectly timed to his heartbeat. He looked up from his laptop, the glow from the monitor painted the room in pale blue. Then came the whisper, soft as exhale. "You forgot to knock?" The words slithered through the wall behind his desk. He froze, listening. Rain outside. A car passing far away. Then silence again. He laughed nervously at himself, reached for his phone, and saw a notification from the recording app he sometimes used to track ideas. The MIC had been active for 11 minutes. He hadn't turned it on. He pressed play. At first, only static. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of breathing. Wet, shallow. A voice whispered on the edge of the static, his own name. Ethan's thumb hovered over delete. Instead, he saved the file and shut off the phone. When he woke the next morning, a folded note lay on the floor just inside his door. Damp, as if it had been slid under from the rain outside. The handwriting was cramped and shaking. "You forgot to knock before entering. That's rule 1. There was no signature. That afternoon, Maeve knocked again, 2 quick taps. She looked worse than before, circles under her eyes, a bandage on her forearm, her tattoos fading into grey under the dim hall light. "Your power flicker last night too?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Whole block probably." Maeve shook her head. "Only these houses went dark. 11 on this stretch. Same grid, same owner." She led him to her kitchen. The counter was covered with sketches, blueprints, hand-drawn in black marker. "I started mapping it," she said. "The walls line up weird. Look." She pointed to dotted lines between the units. "There's space missing. About 2 feet thick, all through the row." "A crawl space?" "Bigger. A whole network. You can hear it breathing if you listen long enough." Ethan frowned. "You serious?" Maeve rummaged in a drawer, pulled something wrapped in tissue paper, and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a faint clink. Inside was a fragment of porcelain, white, curved, and ridged. "Found this in the vent behind my bed," she said. "Looks like a tooth, doesn't it? Human-sized, but metal edge." Ethan picked it up carefully. Serrated grooves ran along one side. It shimmered like steel under the light. "Jesus," he whispered. "Where did you—" "Don't," she cut in. "He listens when you ask." The word he hung between them. Maeve poured whiskey into mismatched mugs again, hands trembling slightly. "You should move out," she said. "Tonight if you can." Ethan looked around her small apartment. Every vent was covered in duct tape. Every mirror faced the wall. A crucifix made from tattoo needles hung above her stove. "What about you?" Maeve's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. "I've got debts. And someone has to watch the feed." "The what?" Instead of answering, she opened her phone and scrolled to a hidden app. A live video filled the screen, grainy, infrared, time-stamped. It showed a narrow hallway, wet concrete floor. A shape moved just at the edge of the frame, tall, inhumanly thin, skin pale as the porcelain fragment. "Where is this?" Ethan whispered. Maeve locked the phone. "Below us." That night Ethan couldn't sit still. Every creak in the floorboards became a footstep. Every tick of the clock echoed like a hammer. Around midnight, he found himself kneeling by the air vent behind his bed, the same place the whisper had come from. The screws were rusted but gave way with effort. Behind the grill lay darkness, stale air, and a faint metallic smell. He aimed his phone flashlight inside. Something glinted, a small lens, recessed deep in the vent. A camera. Ethan's pulse spiked. He reached in, fingers brushing metal. The camera was mounted to a narrow strip of plastic, trailing thin wires that disappeared into the wall. He tugged gently. The whole panel shifted an inch. Beneath it, more wiring, old coaxial lines, bundled with tape, and a GoPro, still recording. Ethan pulled it free. The red light blinked once and died. He set it on the table, heart pounding. The SD card slot was still warm. He slid it into his laptop. The video began with static, then an image of his own room from a low angle near the floor. The feed jittered slightly, like something breathing near the lens. He watched himself walk in, sit on the bed, scroll his phone, completely unaware. Then, at the 37-second mark, a movement behind him. A figure rose from the shadow at the corner, white mask, featureless except for a cracked line running from temple to chin. The thing crouched behind his bed, head tilting left and right, as though studying him. Ethan stopped the video. The rain outside had gone utterly silent, as if the world were holding its breath. He muted the audio anyway, afraid of what he might hear if he let it run. When he finally forced himself to hit play again, the feed had changed. The figure was gone. The camera angle tilted upward, showing the ceiling vent. From inside the vent, something began to push outward, slowly, deliberately, until the metal mesh bowed. Then the screen went black. Ethan stared at his own ceiling. The vent above him was still dry, but a faint red smear ran along its edge. He backed away, grabbing his phone. No signal. Every network bar vanished. Even the Wi-Fi name WhittakerNet had disappeared. A knock echoed from the hallway, 3 slow taps. Not at his door. From inside the wall. He turned the deadbolt, heart slamming. "Maeve," he whispered. No reply. The whisper returned, low and close to his ear. Rule 2, never look up. He couldn't help it. His gaze rose. The vent grill quivered. A trickle of dark liquid, thicker than water, fell from one corner, landing on the floor beside his shoe with a dull tap. He stumbled back, grabbing the flashlight. The beam caught the stain spreading across the wood grain. Dark crimson. The smell hit him a second later, copper and rot. Then, from above the ceiling, a faint mechanical click. Another. And another. Like cameras waking up. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat against the front door until dawn, flashlight aimed at the hallway. When the grey morning finally seeped in, he heard movement outside, boots on wet pavement. Malcolm stood by the mailbox, feeding envelopes into the slot. He turned, that cloudy eye fixing on Ethan through the rain-fogged glass. "You settling in?" he called. Ethan opened the door an inch. "Your wiring's a mess. There's cameras in the vents." Malcolm smiled thinly. "Old security system. Never got around to uninstalling it. They are recording. Everything records, son. That's life now." Ethan stepped out onto the porch. "Someone's inside the crawlspace. I've got video." Malcolm's smile widened, but his gaze didn't change. "Walls remember more than you think. Best not to dig." He turned to leave, limping away down the street. The rain swallowed him in seconds. Ethan stood there until he realized the porch light above his head was still on, though he distinctly remembered it burning out 2 nights ago. The filament glowed faint blue. When he looked closer, he saw the faint reflection of a face in the glass, smooth, featureless porcelain staring back. The bulb flickered, then burst with a pop. That evening Maeve appeared again, breathless, shaking, phone clutched tight. "Hey," she said, using his nickname for the first time. "It's not just us. The whole block's wired. The walls run to Malcolm's basement." He blinked. "You've been down there?" "Almost. There's a hatch under his workshop. I saw movement." "His." A thud interrupted her. From beneath the floor. Another. Louder. They both froze. The thuds became rhythmic, drag, pause, drag. The floorboards trembled with each pull. Maeve whispered, "He's moving again." "Who?" She looked at him, eyes wet. The one in the porcelain mask. The rain outside intensified until the sound drowned everything. The ceiling light dimmed, casting long shadows down the hall. Ethan lifted the flashlight toward the ceiling just as a hollow knock-knock echoed from above. Maeve gripped his arm. "Don't answer it." The sound came again, closer this time, right above them. Then the unmistakable click of a GoPro powering on. The flashlight flickered out. Darkness swallowed the room, except for the faint red recording light shining through the vent. Part 3, the Crawlspace Network. The rain hadn't stopped in 19 days. It sounded thicker now, as if every drop carried weight. By the time Ethan reached Maeve's door, the hallway smelled of ozone and rust. She opened before he could knock twice, hoodie up, a flashlight clenched in her teeth. "It's louder tonight," she said. Under the floor. A hollow thud traveled through the boards, followed by the thin metallic click-click of a camera lens resetting. Ethan's stomach tightened. "We finish it tonight." Maeve nodded. Basement. They crossed the courtyard through mist so thick the world felt underwater. Malcolm's house crouched at the far end of the block, lights dead, curtains drawn. The porch boards sagged like a mouth missing teeth. Maeve pried the back door lock with a screwdriver. The door sighed open. Inside, the smell of diesel, metal, and mold. Downstairs, the basement door was chained, 2 links freshly cut and re-welded. Someone had wanted it shut for good. Ethan swung the crowbar he'd brought from his trunk. The lock snapped with a sound too loud for the quiet house. A rush of cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of soil and something else, preserved, chemical, wrong. The stairwell descended into concrete darkness. Flashlights jittered across the walls, catching the shimmer of moisture and faint scratches, tally marks etched into the paint, 1, 2, 3, 67. At the bottom stood a steel hatch sunk into the floor, ringed with bolts. A keypad beside it blinked red, but the cover plate hung open. Maeve whispered, "Power's still running." Ethan crossed the wires with the crowbar tip. Sparks hissed, the light turned green, and the hatch released with a groan that vibrated through the entire foundation. Below, a ladder, metal and slick with condensation, disappearing into a pit of darkness. He looked at Maeve. "You first?" She grinned, teeth pale in the beam. "You wish." They went together. The crawlspace wasn't a crawlspace at all, it was a corridor system, 6 feet high, lined with concrete and tangled cables. The air was stale, humming with distant fans. Along each wall, cameras blinked red, 1 every 10 feet. Microphones dangled from the ceiling like spiders. The tunnels branched, intersecting beneath other homes. Hand-painted arrows marked the walls, A1, A12, B-Wing, Feed Loop 4. Maeve whispered, "Jesus, it's a network." Ethan followed a cable bundle to a door covered in warning tape. Beyond it lay a small control room, monitors stacked on metal shelves, their blue glow strobing across the walls. Every screen showed a different home, kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms. 11 houses total. On one monitor, Ethan saw himself, standing exactly where he stood now, camera angle from above. Another screen labeled Archive S19E08 played footage of a man being dragged through the same tunnel, screaming. Maeve scrolled through a console log beside the screens. Line after line read. The Crawlspace Society, live feed to Season 19, audience count 198,421. Season 19, she whispered. A shelving unit behind them held labeled boxes, wallets, driver's licenses, keys. Each box bore a date. The oldest was 2005. Ethan's hands trembled as he picked up a wallet. Inside, an ID photo of a smiling woman, stamped missing in red ink. Maeve touched his arm. "We need proof. Film everything." He raised his phone. The moment the camera app opened, every monitor blinked to static. Then Malcolm's voice filled the room through a tinny speaker, calm, almost paternal. "Breaking the lease already, Mr. Caldwell? That's disappointing." Maeve spun toward the speaker. "You sick freak." Malcolm interrupted, his tone steady. "You both wanted cheaper rent. You're part of the product now. Tonight's finale. Make it memorable. Somewhere down the tunnel, a door slammed. The fans shut off. Darkness swallowed the hum. A new sound replaced it, footsteps, deliberate and synchronized, echoing from two directions. Maeve grabbed Ethan's wrist. Run. They sprinted down a side passage, flashlight beams bouncing off wet walls. Ahead, a flash of movement, a figure stepping into view, tall and rigid, face covered by a cracked porcelain mask. The eyes behind it gleamed black in the flashlight. The mask's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth, metal, saw-edged. Another shape appeared behind them. Then a third. Ethan swung the crowbar, catching the first figure's shoulder. The impact sent the mask spinning sideways but didn't drop him. Left tunnel! Maeve shouted. They bolted down a narrower corridor, only 4 feet wide. The porcelains followed, cameras mounted on their chests flashing red like heartbeat lights. Maeve ducked through a side hatch, yanking Ethan after her. Inside, a storage alcove filled with old tripods, halogen lights, and boxes labeled EP62, EP74. She grabbed a spray can from her backpack, the same silver paint she used for tattoo stencils. Cover me. Ethan braced the door as one of the masked figures slammed into it. The hinges screamed. Maeve flicked a lighter, sprayed a jet of flame through the crack. The hiss turned into a roar, the figure reeled back, mask blackening. When the smoke cleared, the door hung twisted. One porcelain lay half inside, burning. The others closed in. Ethan lunged, swinging the crowbar again. The mask shattered, revealing a boy's face beneath, blooded, terrified. Ricky? Ethan gasped. The kid's eyes were wide, pleading. He said he'd kill my mom if I didn't. A gunshot cut him off. Ricky dropped. Smoke drifted through the tunnel. Malcolm stepped into the light, shotgun cradled under one arm, raincoat slick with condensation. His bad leg dragged, leaving a wet scrape behind him. He aimed casually. You're the first tenant to make it this far. Shame you had to ruin the show. Maeve raised her phone, camera light glowing. Smile for your audience, you bastard. Malcolm tilted his head. Ah, clever girl. You found the upstream feed. He gestured toward the ceiling, small microphones blinking red. Then let's give them an ending. He fired. The blast tore into the concrete beside Ethan, spraying dust. Maeve dove behind a crate. Ethan charged, swinging the crowbar. The second shot went wide, ricocheting off a pipe. Steam burst through the air, scalding and thick. Malcolm stumbled, coughing. Ethan slammed the crowbar into the shotgun barrel, twisting it away. It fired once more into the ceiling, splitting a main water line. Rainwater, filthy, grey, poured in, flooding the tunnel ankle deep, then knee deep. Maeve screamed, "Keep rolling!" Her phone still streamed, a red notification flashed, alive, viewers 221,876. Malcolm fell against the wall, leg bleeding, voice breaking into manic laughter. 19 years. 67 tenants. You think you're the first to fight back? Another siren rose, faint at first, then closer. Police. Maeve shouted, they saw it. The stream went viral. Malcolm's smile faltered. He looked up, eyes glassy. You can't kill what's already broadcast. He tried to lift the gun. Ethan wrenched it free, slammed the butt against his chest. The old man dropped, breath rattling like static. From his pocket, a small device slid out, a remote labeled feed control. The red light blinked live. Ethan crushed it under his boot. The tunnel lights flickered once, twice, then died. For a moment there was only the sound of rainwater rushing in and Maeve's ragged breathing. Then, above them, doors slammed open, and voices shouted through megaphones. The crawlspace became a crime scene by dawn. 42 boxes unearthed under Malcolm's cherry tree. Names matched to missing persons reports spanning nearly 2 decades. Maeve gave her statement, voice hoarse, hands still trembling. Ethan said little. His memory replayed the tunnel, the masks, Ricky's face, Malcolm's last smile. News outlets called it the Crawlspace murders. The livestream vanished within hours, scrubbed by someone before police could trace the servers.